Boker Tov. Shabbos. It's wonderful to see you this morning. I am not Rabbi Latovsky, who will be leading the Torah study today. I'm Rabbi Enid later, and the Rabbi Emerita at Beth Israel, the West Temple. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes.
Online, if they can hear, that's important for them to hear you.
Thank you. Online, can you hear me?
They've been.
Okay.
You're always paying attention.
Yes, okay. Getting their breakfasts.
I'm surprised. I don't think it's usually like there. Good.
Any,
Harry, could you, just, Sheila, do you have a copy of the, Eis Chaim? No, yet.
You want?
Please. Wasn't there a source?
There is a source sheet,
It's
yes,
here.
yes, and it's on it, it will be on its way.
What do you want me to help?
Oh, you're gonna put it on there? It's okay.
Okay. So, where to begin? It's such a.
That was last week. In the
Right.
beginning.
So true. Last week was in the beginning. I had written I was asked to write a Devar Torah for my seminary, which sends out Divrei Torah during the course of the year. And, okay. I was asked to write a Devar Torah for my seminary. And I have 6 of them to write during the course of the year. I went to the Academy for Jewish Religion, and each week they sent out, as all the other seminaries do, Divrei Torah. And I was writing on Bereshit, and I worked very hard and diligently to get my work done on time and in time and way ahead of time. And of course, right before our Torah portion of last week was the horrible events in Israel of the week before, of the Saturday, Shabbat before. And as I reflected upon what I had written, and it was too late to change anything, so off it went, talking about the environment, which was very important. But I realized that as I was writing about Adam being told not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I had a really hard time at the time writing out the word evil. It just seemed so evil. I mean, it's just filled with such heaviness and such awfulness. And I couldn't imagine that that's really, is that what God is talking about here? And yet, after the events of October 7th and beyond, I realized that indeed, probably yet again, there is certainly evil in the world. And it's, I feel like I go through through my life with rose-colored glasses, and I know that I'm a Pollyanna, and I try to look for the good in everything and then look for the good in everyone. And over these. Thank you. Here you are.
You know what they say? It makes me wonder when they rebuild Gaza, what they will consider climate-wise, in other words, the products they use and everything like that, if they will take anything, into consideration.
Sure. One would hope so, right?
They have a chance to make.
They have, right, all of us.
To make a sample,
Yes,
of the whole thing.
that's right. No, that's very, very true. So we have this evil that's in the world, and now it gets reflected in our Torah portion this week. And so I invite us to start at the end of last week's Torah portion, which is a prologue to what is coming. So in Eitz Chaim, if you turn to page 34, it's Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Page 34. And indeed, in this, and the idea of, and the Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth. And the Hebrew word for wickedness is ra, which is for the tree of good and evil, right? We have tov, ra. And so here the Hebrew word is ra. And it's going to undergo a change by the time we get to our Torah portion for this week. So
It's not called Ra anymore.
it's not
Ra
called Ra.
Mas.
That's right. So we read here, the Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth, and how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. Ra, ra, ra. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on earth, and his heart was saddened. The Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the men whom I created, men together with beasts, creeping things, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. So that's how our portion ended last week. It's basically getting us, as the rabbis divided things up, right? They left us with a little cliffhanger. So what will happen, right?
So God wanted to undo whatever he did.
Whatever God had done, all that work, right? All that beautiful creation. There's too much evil, there's too much wickedness, and it saddened God. What an idea.
So the Cliff Notes version is, so he made a great big mikvah, but it didn't work. It didn't purify.
That's true too. That's true too. But just think about the text is saying here that God was saddened by what had happened. Sheila?
Is it possible that the evil and all was what they were trying to do basically is to get rid of all the idols, all the mythology that existed about creation, and they were separating the mythology from Samaria and Acadia and all those other Ugaritic stories. And this is to put an end to them and say, okay, no, we're going to get a fresh start.
Mhm.
This is God now, and we're going, I mean, and it just occurred to me.
Sure. Well, it's possible, but let's find out. Okay, yes.
I was gonna say a little counter to that. Most of the peoples of that time have a flood story. That story is not particular to Judaism.
Mhm.
Right.
So this is, since everybody else had it, they kind of wanted to incorporate something of that nature also into it. So this is their version. Well, I don't know the reason in other cultures why the flood came about,
Mhm.
but I guess we're good at guilt, so.
Right, sure.
Yeah, that's why they put this in.
Sure. So if Rabbi Latovsky were sitting here, he would talk to you about the flood story of Gilgamesh and the Babylonian flood story. And I could hear him saying this with exuberance and only the way that Rabbi Latovsky can talk about it. But the idea is that in that story too, well, in that story, the gods are not saddened, they are angry. Why are they angry? Because they're not being fed in time. They're upset that they're not being taken care of when they should be.
All this makes you think that the entire inhabitants of the world had similar experiences, similar stories like flood and so on and so forth. But for some reason, we came later on, Hebrews and Jews,
Right.
for some unknown reason, maybe genetic and evolution, we had more people who sat down and wrote these things and made a whole collection of it and then propagated it and then built more and more and more layers on top of it. It's all the same.
Right, but
I mean, you know,
right, we take a little bit from this and a little bit from that and we make it our own, right? I mean, it does happen. And let's face it, Torah does not begin with Abraham, right? Or Exodus. It does not begin with the Jewish story. Torah begins with the story of the world, right? Humanity. Thank you. It's a wide angle lens. It's spread out. This, I mean, from our perspective, this is our perspective of the flood story, right? Let's face it. And just on a personal note, like, can you imagine a flood, going through a flood? It seems like your whole world is being destroyed, right? I could cry as I say those words, but it's true. There are many flood stories because it's quite possible that many people experienced floods.
flood is something
Right.
that humans can believe in because it's not being propagated, it's not being promulgated.
It
it's not-
happens.
It's a natural.
Right, a natural
Happens
phenomenon. Exactly.
all over the globe.
Oops,
Exactly.
what happened?
So,
Uh-oh.
I've never had that happen. I think it's running back. Just keep going.
Okay, all right. So,
I always thought, not that there were multiple civilizations with, a flood story, but that this was the flood story and those civilizations came after this flood story.
uh-huh. We could think that way, but I beg to differ. I think we would find that our flood story is old, but maybe not as old as other stories, for sure. But be that as it may, this is the flood story that we
There
came
it
up
is.
with to tell our story. Because there must be something about the way this is told that's different from the other stories. And it's certainly, God is not upset because he's not being fed, right? God is saddened because of what he sees going on in the world. Not only with humanity, but also with all flesh, not the fish. It's going to be hard to put them in the ark and carry them. But everything else, it's topsy-turvy. I think if you have talked about this before with the different strands of Torah lines, that if we were in the priestly tradition, where everything is organized and in its place, evidently things are not as organized as they should be. Things are not in their place. And the rabbis midrashically speak about stuff that's going on sexually that shouldn't be going on. Rashi speaks about what is this that's going on, and it's robbery. That bit by bit, people are being robbed, but they can't take it to a court to prove it because it's not like enough. And after a while, it becomes, impossible to bear, and people just are corrupted that way.
maybe God realizes that after all this absolutely mind-boggling creation that he has done, and he has created all these different creatures and then human, which is the pinnacle of his creation, maybe he realizes that, once I create them, from there on, I may not have much control over it. They will just develop and they will go according to their inherent qualities.
Right. That's what free will is. And sometimes it's sad to watch. And sometimes at this point, it's impossible for God to watch. And afterwards, God's realized, well, we'll get to that, hopefully. Okay, so let's turn to page 41. Pardon me. So what I want to do this morning is we'll focus on the story of Noah. If we're able to get any farther than that, that would be great. But we'll aim for the story of Noah, and we'll take a little side trip when we get to the word that speaks about the wickedness that's going on at the time. And then we'll go back to the text, and then at the end of the text, where the rainbow appears, we'll talk about the symbolism of the rainbow. Okay, so do you like read for each other? Like, do we take turns reading?
Yeah.
Great. You like to read? This is my husband, Harry, by the way.
Hi.
And I'm going to stop you, but just be prepared. Okay.
Sorry.
Yes,
Okay, which verse are we on?
we're at chapter 6, verse 9.
This is the line of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God.
Okay, and stop right there. So people always like to stop here and say, what does that mean? Noah was righteous in his age. Okay, and if we look down at the bottom of the page, even for the the commentary in the center of the page. So it says a righteous person, a tzaddik, is one whose conduct God finds to be irreproachable. A blameless person, tamim, is one whose unimpeachable integrity makes the enjoyment of God's fellowship possible. So if it makes the enjoyment of God's fellowship possible, then they're explaining how Noah walked with God. Okay, so we can take it literally that God and Noah walked together, or that Noah walked with God as knowing that there is in God's company, however that's understood. Okay, no, we know that Noah has a relationship with God because God's going to talk to Noah, right? So here we have, and Noah is not Jewish, remember, right? Noah is this person of the world, okay? At the bottom of the page where it says in his age, the sages debate whether this is a true compliment or a qualified praise. Rabbi Yochanan sees Noah as righteous only relatively, in contrast to the wicked people around him. In a more respectable age, he would have been no better than average. Reish Lachish, on the other hand, says that anyone who had the moral backbone to be a good person in an immoral society would have been an even better person in a generation that encouraged goodness. And this
Rish Lakish was a highwayman before he was a sage, so.
That's right, good for him, right? Right? And highwayman does not mean that he collected tolls on the highway, right? Actually, he did it by force. Yes.
Right? So we see a piece of that in Lot.
In Lot?
In Lot, yes, because he was the only one in, was it Sodom or Gomorrah,
Yeah.
whichever one it was,
Yeah.
that actually invited
So,
in
right.
the angels, which he didn't know
Yes,
were
the
angels.
visitors, right. So Lot, as difficult as the people around him are, he's at
Yeah,
least
he was a little bit
a
better.
touch of that, that's right. So one emphasizes the power of society to shape the behavior of its members, and the other champions the power of the individual to withstand the pressures of society. Good morning, Sylvia. Okay, and let's hear about, yes.
What do you make of the word tamim being translated as blameless? Blameless.
Well, they're understanding it as whatever was going on around him, he was not doing that. So you could not blame him for acting that way.
Doesn't it also mean that he was
Simple.
simple and kind of
I was just gonna ask if
Run
it's
of
the
the
same,
mill
the simple
or-
son.
Sure.
Is it the
could
same
be,
root?
But we say a Tom, the son, right, of the 4 children,
Yes.
right? So there's the Tom, who is like the simple son or the simple child. So Yeah,
Why blameless here? I don't.
well, I think there's a sense of innocence
Right.
there, right?
I like it.
Okay, all right, okay. Yes,
It doesn't talk about him doing good deeds, though.
no, I mean, we don't hear what he did, right?
Well,
And we do
when
hear
he's
that,
building the ark,
but-
he never tells people to repent or to change or anything. So
right?
he was good, but he didn't do anything with it.
We don't hear that from him, right? I mean, that for a text that's so filled with all these wonderful details, we don't hear if Noah said anything to the people around him. The rabbis heard it. The rabbis heard the words because that's what we read in rabbinic midrash. And they'll say as Noah was building, right? Oh, what are you doing? There's going to be a flood. You've got to change your ways. And, but as much as he would try to tell them some, to change, no, they refuse.
Does Noah
This is-
actually speak anywhere in the Torah? Or is it all
Yeah.
midrash?
He does speak.
He does speak,
Yes.
okay.
This is
What
in
he
kind
didn't
of
do.
distinction. Oh, this is in kind of distinction to the story of Yonah, where the people are wicked. But, instead of just wiping out Nineveh,
Right.
he sends a warning, and it's so interesting that that's what's done there. But this is, oh no, we're just, we're just going to give you guys a ginormous bath and be done with.
Well, but again, we don't know, but you're right. Maybe at that point, God's behavior changes. And
It-
a warning is important first,
It is called practice makes perfect. He learned. Second time.
Sheila,
I'm just gonna say it's what he didn't say and didn't do. Instead of looking at what he did, that was good, the fact that he didn't do anything
right,
already made him the tzaddik.
right.
He didn't engage in he didn't tell them to stop, but he didn't engage in their activities.
Their activities and their behaviors, right? Okay, the sons.
Okay. Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Okay, thank you.
You're
We'll hear
welcome.
more about them later. Okay, now the earth, and let's take a look at this. Okay, the earth became Batishachet haaretz lifnei haElohim. The earth became corrupt, tishachet, okay, before God, which
Shachet
is
is the same word as hit.
right, which means to hit or to, slaughter. The earth was filled with Timale, and the word for lawlessness, on the next page, haaretz, and then the word is Hamas. Okay,
I'm feeling.
Coincidence?
coincidence,
Well,
right?
actually, they're totally
Okay.
different words.
Let's take a look, okay? Let me-
You didn't know, I think, well, he's an excellent. What?
I took one for myself.
I've got one.
Hey, here's the last one.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if
Is
the
that,
name now is David did
Right,
it,
might have to.
but it's interesting.
yeah, or
So let's find out when you get your,
or.
yes,
Sahar, Hanach, Sahar.
and there's some extras, Sheila has some extras, Harry. Yeah. You're great.
Anybody need just one more? Anybody want to-
Okay. Great, very good, okay. So, in verse 11, we're first introduced to Hamas, the word Hamas, and then as it continues, verse 12, when God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth, and then verse 13, God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. I am about to destroy them with the earth. So here the translation is not only it is lawlessness. But let's take a look at this is from a page out of this book,
What's that book?
which is affectionately known as BDB. Brown, Driver, and Briggs are the author, and it's called the Hebrew and English Lexicon of the Old Testament. It was first published in 1907. And God bless them. As you are well aware, this is before computers. And yet, what this page shows you is a page out of the book where they found each and every mention of this particular word, whatever it may be, in the Bible. And they use in the Old Testament, right? That's a lot of work. In this day and age, you can certainly, I'm still attached to my BDB because I could just kind of flip through and look for things. But if you go online to the website safaria.org, they have BDB online. And I left all the underlines here because all you have to do is click on them and they'll take you right to that particular verse in Tanakh, which is really quite something and very, very helpful. But as we look at this, okay, we see that as a verb, the word Hamas means to treat violently or wrong. This is, of course, from their perspective and their understanding. The Aramaic is rare, to violently seize. And then they tell us about the Arabic, which is, and this is the word Hamas in Arabic, which means to be hard, strict, or rigorous. Okay, then I squeezed in a little piece from Wikipedia that explains the modern day Hamas that we are familiar with. It's an acronym of the Arabic phrase Haraka al-Hamakawama al-Islamiyah, meaning Islamic Resistance Movement. This acronym, HMS, or whatever the letters would be, was later glossed in the Hamas covenant by the Arabic word Hamas, which itself means zeal, strength, or bravery. So when we understand Hamas, right, from our perspective, we see the violence and we see the lawlessness and we see the terror that's inflicted. From their perspective, right, from an Arabic perspective, or at least their understanding, zeal, strength, or bravery. That's hard to hold, right? But that is from another perspective, yes.
So two immediate thoughts as these two perspectives clash. One is history repeats itself, but we have this word meaning zeal on the one hand and violence on the other. And the other thought, and these are just both quick thoughts, so I don't know, just at least it starts a conversation, is when we come across zealotry, it often is with at least some reluctance. So for example, when Pinchas he stops the plague and he gets a covenant of peace, but then we spend a lot of time when we're on that parsha discussing what that could possibly mean, since what he did was so violent.
Exactly.
And here we are with a word that it seems to mean zeal, and doesn't zeal often lead to thoughtless violence?
Yeah.
Right. Very, very true. As a matter of fact, the Berit Shalom for Pinchas in Torah, the word shalom is Shin, Lamed, Vav, Mem Sofit, but the Vav is made in two pieces. as opposed to a complete peace. It's not a complete because of its zealousness. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Whew. All of these, it continues with nouns and how it's used in various places. But if this can provide a list for us of what's going on at during this what is it, prenuvial, what is the word for flood? Antediluvial, thank you. I appreciate that. Antediluvial times, what's going on here? So there's like a whole list here. There's violence, there's physical violence, something that's wrong, injurious language, harsh treatment, rude wickedness of men, their noisy, wild ruthlessness, denied of the enthronement of violence, it's used, instruments of violence, witness that promotes violence and wrong, hatred characterized by violence, a violent man, an ish kamash, et cetera, et cetera. It's all, it just, when this goes beyond robbery, this goes beyond even sexual acts that aren't of the norm, shall we say. But this, when we see it in this light, it just, for me, especially over these past 2 weeks, this violence part is just so present and so evident. And what does God want to do with this but to wipe it out? And how do you get to the root of that? It's so difficult. You can't.
We conceive of God as being all-knowing, omnipotent, and so forth. Could not God, was he not aware prior to the creation that this would be happening? Did he make a mistake? It was good. After each day of creation, he looked at it and said it was good.
Right.
Can you explain that apparent contradiction?
As I attempt to, I would say that the rabbis teach, all is ordained, but man has free will. And it's not a good answer. And if we want to think of God as all-knowing, then this is a tough one. This challenges us, right? And for God to be saddened, like if you knew this was going to happen, and I'm sad about it. I'm really sad, a big disappointment. Yes.
But also throughout the Torah, God does put man asunder many times because he's angry at the actions, from, giving up the flood and then Aaron's sons, et cetera, through the whole Torah. So he's made these creations and then we don't always follow his commandments.
Right. Yes.
A couple more thoughts. One is this is juxtaposed to the previous parsha. So maybe one answer is that we do have re-choice, whatever that means. If Adam and Eve had chosen differently, we wouldn't be here because they'd still be in the garden.
Right.
And the other is, I think maybe one of the possible definitions of omniscient would be knowing all the possible outcomes of all those choices. So God would be able, with that definition, to know millions, billions, infinite numbers of possible outcomes. This is only one possible outcome that's the result of all these choices. So it could have come out differently, but it didn't.
Thank you for that. That's another way of looking at it. Yes.
I always used to find that more confusing before I had kids. And I find that even though I know what's going to happen when I let them do certain things, I need to let them do it because it's better for them. And I'm actually prouder of them once they learn the lesson that they're supposed to learn, than if I just stop them from doing it to begin with.
Sure, sure. Thank you. I hope that it doesn't get to this. We hope that our children, learn from the mistakes. How many mistakes did it take for the world to look this way, right? And so let's continue with verse 14. I'm sorry, would you like to continue verse 14?
I'll read it in Portuguese. The Hebrew way. It's the Hebrew way. עשה לך תיבת שא גופר, קינים תעשה את התיבה, וחפרת אותה מבית ומחוץ לכופר. וזה אשר תעשה אותה 300 אמה אורך, התיבה 50 אמה רוחבה, ו3 אמה קומתה. צוהר תעשה לתיבה, ואל אימה תאכלנה מלמעלה, ופתח התיבה בצידה, תשים תחתים 32 תעשה.
Have we been reading along, or should we read it in English too?
English too.
Okay.
I need to.
Okay, make an opening for.
Make yourself, we're back to 14.
Okay. Make yourself an ark, a gopher wood, make it an ark with compartments, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how should make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make an opening for daylight in the ark and terminate it with a cubit of the top. Put the entrance to the ark in its side. Make it with bottom, second, and third decks.
Great, thank you. So here we have this ark, this teva. The next time we see the word teva, it's not going to be on the grand scale, but it's going to be a tiny little basket teva that's going to hold our dear little Moses, right? As he goes on his ride in the water. The word for pitch is kofer, and it's the chaf, fe, and resh. And if we stuck a dagesh in the fe, it would become a pe, kaper, like kippur. So pitch is something that covers something, and kippurim, you ask that your sins be, you kind of cover over what you have done. We like to think of it as like releasing and undoing everything, but there's really this idea of just covering it over. Be that as it may. And then what's the kaporet?
Covering of the ark.
Is when you shlach kaporeth and you atone for your sins by putting the chicken over your head or shirt and
Right, so there's shlach kaporet, right, where the chicken goes flying, and so do your sins, okay?
And we also send the goat out into the desert to atone for, to take all our sins on it away.
Right. And then on the ark, is there a kaporet?
Yeah, parochet.
The parochet, right? Kind of if they turns around, and that covers where the letters change, but they also cover the where the Torah is. That's the what should we call it? Drapery or the curtain, right?
What is gopher wood? Is it that? What is it?
Gopher wood. It's a kind of wood that's evidently good for the water and is able to leap tall buildings with a single.
I don't know this.
But evidently in that area of the world, certainly. Does it say gopher wood? The term appears only here. Some scholars link it to cypress, which was used widely in shipbuilding in ancient times because of its resistance to rot. Great.
Or only point is that this is something unique.
It could very well be. It could very well be. And also note, did you happen to hear at the beginning of verse 16 the word Zohar,
Yes, that's always bothered me.
right?
That word has always bothered me, because it's here said that it means a window or an opening. But, isn't that also a word that's only used here in the Bible? I'm trying to think. Another one of those.
The Hebrew word Zohar refers here to roof, as it does also in Akkadian.
Oh, so it's a few other.
Terminated with a terminated up. It could mean that the slanting roof should project 1 cubit beyond the side of the ark. We're not quite sure what it's an opening, right? Why would they need an opening?
So the birds can fly away.
In the sky?
To be able to see the sky, for like some light to come in, and for some air to come in as well as go out. Let's face it, folks, 3 levels, right, of lots of animals. You know, you want to have some sort of circulation. I say this just as an offering some reasoning
There was the
here.
meat animals and the dairy animals and the trafe animals.
Right. Okay, for my part, we're moving along here, okay? Would you like to read?
I'm just listening.
Okay, all right. Would you like to read?
Bad voice.
Okay,
Where are we?
verse 17.
17.
Yeah.
For my part, I am about to bring the flood, waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh under the sky in which there is breath of life. Everything on earth shall perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark with your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives. And of all that lives, of all flesh, you shall take 2 of each into the ark to keep alive with you. They shall be male and female. From birds of every kind, cattle of every kind of creeping thing on earth, 2 of each shall come to you to stay alive. For your part, take everything that is eaten and store it away to serve as food for you and for them. Noah did so, just as God commanded him, so he did.
So here we have the God is sharing with Noah that God will bring about a flood. Noah should collect 2 of every kind of creature, right, on the earth, and that you should take food for yourselves and for the creatures. And the footnote at the bottom of the page, everything that is eaten on the vegetarian diet, described in 1:29-30. So for people who are vegetarian, basically we're not in to eat meat until after the flood, and that's where that kicks in. But up until this time, we've been vegetarian, so to speak. Okay.
Has anything been said for the mother of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, the wife of Noah, a name or anything?
No name.
Nothing.
Mrs. Noah.
Mrs. Noah, right,
Okay.
right, exactly. One of our dear friends at Purim time, she always dresses up, or she, for many years, dressed up as Mrs. Noah, and she had on a nice little house dress and a mop. And that was her costume. Charlotte. Right, so chapter 7. Okay, let's move on.
Interesting, no grandchildren are mentioned.
I'm sorry?
No grandchildren are mentioned.
Not yet, no.
They're not old. They're only like.
Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark with all your household, for you alone have I found righteous before me in this generation. Of every pure animal you shall take 7 pairs, males and their mates, and of every animal that is not pure, 2, a male and its mate. Of the birds of the sky also 7 pairs, male and female, to keep seed alive upon all the earth. For in 7 days' time I will make it rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the earth all existence that I created. And Noah did just as the Lord commanded him.
So this seems to be a restatement of what we just read, but with a change. right? And so how do we understand, but wait, I thought it was just 2 of every creature, right? And now 7 pairs? So if we look at the bottom, right above the line where it says 7 pairs, it says there is a discrepancy between this verse and the instructions, which mention 1 pair of each species. This has prompted modern scholars to assert that the 2 passages originate from diverse strands of ancient Israelite tradition. Traditional commentators explained that 6:19 through 20 referred to the minimum number needed for the regeneration of the species, whereas chapter 7, verses 2 to 3 include the additional pure animals needed for the sacrifices for the flood.
Interestingly, it never describes what is pure and what is impure here.
No, not.
We
not
don't
yet.
know we don't know what's pure and what's impure, but take 7 of the pure and
Right.
2 of the impure.
Right. So if we were to take a step back with that, because it's a great question, how do we know and what are they talking about? Is it possible that, we read these stories as they come, as if they are in chronological order? And if we have 2 versions of what to do, is it possible that this later, the beginning of chapter 7 is a later version, which understands pure and impure?
No, it's just 2 sources, the JEDD.
Right, 2 different sources.
What is interesting is that already at that time, before there is really a word, they're talking about sacrifices.
Mhm.
I mean,
Well, even Abel did sacrifices.
well, that's
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 the cause of why one of them killed the other.
but that's a lot,
Although this is, but it's later, on the one hand, yes, there are sacrifices at the time. But on the other hand, from our perspective, these are rabbis who, or commentators, right? Who are projecting back the need for sacrifices. Okay, I mean, as they read this, they're going from their own experience. Well, we use sacrifices, we offered sacrifices, so that must be what it was for. Okay.
Expand on that a little bit. This is being read by us at a time when sacrifices haven't existed for many years, because we haven't had the temple for almost 2,000 years. But if it's being read in temple times, perhaps it's toward an audience that's just used to that. Well, of course, we know what's pure and impure because of what comes later, but we already know that, so we can project it back onto this and say, well, that's it.
Because we read the Torah year after year, we already know about what's pure and what's evil. We should do it here.
Doing it. Pure and impure from that point of view, they don't have it, they don't need an explanation.
Right. Just think of that first reading. What was it like? That was the first time they read Sylvia and then yourself. So,
No, we have 2 versions of the Garden of Eden story. And some people interpret them as from 2 different texts. Or it's like when somebody tells you a story, there's some people who say, well, you get to the point, and somebody else goes round and round as they tell the story. So when I always read this, I always thought it was like whoever wrote it down said, oh, I forgot this. Put this in, because there were really more details. It's like when you come from an appointment and you're going, like, say you went to the doctor and you got instructions. And the doctor gives you all these details, and you come home and your spouse asks you, well, what did the doctor say? And you start to tell it and you think, oh, that's too much detail. And then your kid comes and says, well, what did the doctor say? And you know that your kid is interested in the details that might frighten your spouse. So then you tell all the other things. So there's a lot of ways to understand why there's more detail on the same event than that it's necessarily 2 versions.
Sure.
There's another way of saying that in business. There's the executive summary and then there's the details.
Yes, that's also another way to say it, right?
There's another thing is that sometimes they tell you one thing, and if you look at the notes, doctors especially, and
Yes.
teachers, in other words, when you're evaluating a kid, you tell them everything is fine, you look at the notes, No, but he did this, and this. You are concerned with, even if the teacher is.
Nelson.
Oh, Nelson, your hand is raised.
We can't hear you, Nelson.
Turn it off and on again.
You muted.
Oh, you're muted, Nelson. Can you unmute?
How about this time?
Better.
All right. I got 3 different microphones and they don't agree with each other. Previously, we're told everything on the earth is corrupt, has to be destroyed. Now suddenly we have pure things. Where'd they come from?
Boy.
Right, so the question is pure of.
And we've already said that we exempt the
what-
fish.
Right.
That's
The fish are
breathing also.
exempt, right? And what does pure mean? And we don't know, right? We don't know. Evidently, it's possible that it was in this writing, it's taking into account this idea of the pure and the treif animals, but truly we don't know. And the other thing is that notice how many pairs of them are we supposed to get? 7.
8.
Where's 8?
Pure and then 1 impure.
7, so 7 pure, right? So we have 7 of this complete for something. And then 1, that 8, for propagating. Yes? Okay, thank you, Nelson. And
I was just kind of found it interesting that in the previous verse, it talked about not only the animal, but take everything that is eaten and stored away, because, the flood's going to ruin all life, even plant life. And so he made specific mention of get the food that you're going to need, and that can, most of the fruits have the seeds, so you can propagate the species again. But then in chapter 7, it only bothers with the animals and not at all talking about what foodstuffs or vegetable matter, which might also go back to the question of the tree, because maybe gopher wood wasn't edible, so then they didn't take any with them. So then when the flood came, it got rid of them and don't have it anymore, because like I said, bring fruits and veggies and stuff, and
there was no more gopher. They went for the wood, right, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's a repetition, but not a complete repetition, right? It's variations on a theme that sometimes is repeated and sometimes not. So we finish at 10?
Yeah.
Yes. So, oh, look, it's how time flies. So, and so 40 days and 40 nights, I want to come to the end of the section here. So please turn to chapter 9. So we're on page 51. Okay, and it's chapter 9, verse 8. And I'll just read so that I can read and talk at the same time so we can finish. And God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and your offspring to come, and with every living thing that is with you, birds, cattle, and every wild beast as well, all that have come out of the ark, every living thing on earth. I will maintain my covenant with you. This is a you plural, right? You all. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. God further said, this is the sign that I set for the covenant between me and you, and every living creature with you for all ages to come. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living creature among all flesh, so that the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures, all flesh that is on earth. That, God said to Noah, shall be the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So indeed, God sets God's bow, right? The bow in the clouds. If you turn to the page, I guess there is an article that says the Jewish Rainbow Connection by Rabbi Noah Arnau. And this is actually, I kind of combined this with another article, but when we see a rainbow, we are enjoined by the rabbis of the Talmud in Brachot to recite a blessing. And if you go to the middle of the page, it says the rabbis of the Talmud established that one should recite a blessing on seeing a rainbow. As far as the blessing is concerned, however, all agree that one certainly recites a blessing. So it says in Brachot 59a, what blessing does one recite? Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who remembers the covenant with Noah. It was taught in a Baraita that Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, says that the blessing is, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who is faithful to his covenant and fulfills his word. Rav Papa said, therefore, we will say them both combined. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zocher habrit v'ne'eman b'vrito v'kayam v'ma'amaro. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who remembers the covenant and is faithful to your covenant and faithful to your word. In other words, God keeps God's promise. He goes on to give some examples of the symbolism of the rainbow and why a rainbow. And the first example comes from the prophet Ezekiel, when Ezekiel has this vision of a rainbow and he equates it with God's presence. So when we see a rainbow in the sky, we are really seeing something that is very close to God's presence. And you got to admit, when you see a rainbow in the sky, there is something that takes your breath away, right? And and I heard the voices right, okay? And it's a good sign. I'm not quite sure that the line in the middle of the last page says we can assume God wouldn't show God's self if God intended to destroy the world. So us seeing a rainbow, the presence of God is indeed a good sign. I think that the rainbow continues to be a post-it note for God, I would suggest. Do not destroy the world again. And every time God sees it, God remembers. And just like good parents, right? We want to, sometimes you gotta control yourself and think about letting your children act on their own and make their mistakes, and then, God willing, learn from them as well. There are other interpretations of the rainbow significance, and that is the idea that the keshet is the Hebrew word for bow. It doesn't, in the Torah text, it doesn't say I'm going to put a rainbow in the sky. It says bow, because that's, at the time, that was the word that was used, and we add rainbow because it comes out right at times when there's water in the atmosphere. But this bow is turned, when you go to use a bow and arrow, you're, aiming, right? But this bow is turned up, which means that it's at peace. It's a symbol of peace, because there are no strings attached to the bow. There are no arrows that are visible, and it's pointing upward, away from us. So it's a sign of peace. And then the later, I'm sorry?
Protection is.
And then it becomes a sign of protection, right?
Protecting.
Right, exactly. And then a more modern approach from dear Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch talks about the different colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv. I have not forgotten that since third grade, and every time I come, and it starts with red, and the Hebrew word for red is Adom, which is connected with Adam. And so each of these colors kind of symbolizes the range of life in the world. And so and then when you put it all together, it's a white light, and that's the unity of them all, and of course the unity of God. And more recently, we have Rabbi Shlomo Riskin who talks about the idea that we only see half of the rainbow, right? And that God has done God's part. Now we have to do our part in completing the rainbow and completing the peace in our world. I want to add one more thing, because a rainbow is a circle shape, actually. We don't see the whole circle of colors in the sky. If you were up on a mountain, and there are photographs that you can see that when you look down, or you're above the earth in a way, above where the clouds are, you can see the circle shape. But all that we can see is this part of the shape. I would suggest that a rainbow symbolizes hope. And sometimes all we can see at the moment is a little part of hope. But I think for all of us, by keeping in mind, I worked on this, sorry, all week long. But if we keep in mind that hope, we can come full circle to a time of peace and a time of understanding. And that's what we continue to pray for.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.